President Donald Trump has signed a new executive order aimed at ending union rights for hundreds of thousands of federal workers. The move looks to limit numerous agency employees from unionizing and instructs the government to stop engaging in any collective bargaining. It's the latest attack on federal employees from the Trump administration and comes the same week the Department of Health and Human Services announced they'll cut 10,000 employees from its workforce. Plus, Republicans are ramping up to pass their massive reconciliation package and get it to Trump's desk by Memorial Day. The clock is ticking with only 59 days to secure votes in both chambers. Joining me now is the Hill's congressional reporter, Mychael Schnell. Mychael, thanks so much for joining us. The American Federation of Government Employees has warned Trump's latest executive order would strip labor protections for hundreds of thousands of civil servants. Is this order meant to make it easier to slash the size of the federal workforce?
Yeah, hey, Judy, that could certainly be one of the aspects here. We know that we have seen a number of these unions sue in response to some of these executive orders and other actions taken by the Trump administration, including that Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, that has received so much attention for its efforts to scale down the size and scope of the federal government. So certainly that could be one aspect here, though I will note the Trump administration has said that the purpose of this order, this effort, was because they argued that the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 argued that allows government workers to unionize, which, quote, enables hostile federal unions to obstruct agency management. So that's what we're hearing from the Trump administration directly. But certainly there are a lot of questions here of, is this a way to take away perhaps a roadblock as the Trump administration tries to, as you mentioned, scale back the size and scope of the federal government?
The White House cited national security reasons for ending those collective bargaining agreements with federal unions at multiple agencies. Which ones are specifically targeted?
Yeah, there are a total of 18. I'm going to read you some from the list. It's the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of State, and Veterans Affairs as well. In addition, so those are all, things dealing with national security, as was mentioned. But there are some things that don't exactly relate to national security that were also involved. For example, the Treasury Department, all agencies within HHS, Health and Human Services, as well as the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, National Science Foundation, and the General Services Administration. So as I had mentioned, 18 different agencies here that have been involved. There are also other component agencies that are involved as well. So certainly a very wide swath in terms of this executive order.
Yesterday, Mychael, as you know, the White House announced it was pulling Elise Stefanik's nomination for UN ambassador. And in a Truth Social post, President Trump said it's essential we maintain every Republican seat in Congress. He pulled multiple people from Congress, leaving 4 open seats. Is this a lesson for the president?
I mean, it's sort of interesting because we always knew that this was the problem, and Speaker Johnson, he would probably argue facetiously, but I think there was certainly some truth to it. Had publicly said, I'm pleading with the Trump administration, stop taking my guys. We are running low, and Trump took Mike Waltz to be his national security advisor. He took former Congressman Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general before Matt Gaetz had dropped out, and he took Elise Stefanik to be his UN ambassador. And just the truth of the matter is that congressional Republicans, particularly in the House, have a lot of work to do over the next 2 years. President Trump has a big agenda that he wants to get passed, including extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts. That's going to require near unanimity in the House to get things done because of the slim margin. And there are some folks who are voicing concerns with that effort and others. So at the end of the day, I think that President Trump just recognized that, look, I need as many supporters and votes in the House as possible. That includes Elise Stefanik. So he ultimately came to this decision to yank her nomination. But again, I will note, Judy, this is not some new phenomenon, right? We always knew that the margins are tight in the House. Of course, there's some concern and some questions among Republicans for that special election to fill Mike Waltz's seat next week in Florida. But still, the numbers have been known since November, so it's certainly curious timing.
Republican leaders could call a budget vote next week as they look to pass their massive reconciliation package. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had this to say.
House Republicans are fighting with Senate Republicans. Senate Republicans are fighting with House Republicans. House Republicans are fighting with each other because you've got a group of people who are uncomfortable with the fact that they were forced as House Republicans in so-called swing districts to vote for the largest Medicaid cut in American history. And we will not let the American people ever forget it.
So, Michael, my question to you is Jeffries onto something here? And what are Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson doing to satisfy Republican lawmakers?
Yeah, I mean, he is right in the sense that there has been some Republican infighting over this package. Look, right now, Thune and Johnson have a pretty large task on their hands, a tall task on their hands. They have to reconcile the House's budget resolution with the Senate's budget resolution. And there were a lot of differences in that. Does the debt limit include it? Is it not? How much in spending cuts do you do? How few of spending cuts? Where are those spending cuts from? And what does the extension of the Trump tax cuts look like? That's just a few of these questions. And there has been plenty of infighting among Republicans. You've got hardline conservatives on one hand who want really deep spending cuts and are okay with changes to Medicaid. And then, as Jeffries noted, you have some of those more moderate Republicans, some who represent districts that Kamala Harris had won back in November. And before that, President Biden had won back in 2020, that are apprehensive to go forward with these cuts, particularly if it's going to impact Medicaid. So we're going to see that push and pull play out over the next few weeks. It's going to be interesting to see what compromise Thune and Johnson come up with, because that's going to have to then be cleared by both chambers. And then, Judy, the even more difficult part of this process starts, which is actually crafting the legislation in line with that budget resolution. So Senate Republicans have said that, they're going to see if they can try to have a vote on this next week, which would then mean the House could take it up the week after that and get this part of the job done before folks break for Passover and Easter recess. But it is a very tall task, so we're going to have to see how that moves ahead in the days to come.
Switching gears here to the continued Signalgate fallout, President Trump doesn't seem ready to use his famous catchphrase, "You're fired," on those involved. Does Trump want to avoid starting a laundry list of angry ex-officials who could publicly badmouth him, just like what happened in his first term, or does he not want to give the media a win here?
Look, I'm not going to try to get inside the head of Donald Trump on this, but I will note that thus far he has shown support for his administration officials that were involved with this, particularly Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. So I will note it doesn't seem like this controversy is going away anytime soon. Yesterday, we heard from Roger Wicker. He's the Republican chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He and his Democratic counterpart, Jack Reed, had sent a letter asking for an inspector general report, an investigation into what had happened, and a classified briefing on the matter. Scrutiny is rising among Democrats. Republicans are still some Republicans are still hammering at the administration for what went wrong. So it's going to be interesting to see how Trump deals with this going forward, and if at any point he does end up firing somebody for what happened. But up to this point, it does not seem like there's any appetite for that right now.
Michael, before I let you go, Trump announced new tariffs on auto exports, and the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, responded. Take a listen.
I reject any attempts to weaken Canada, to wear us down, to break us so that America can own us. That will never happen.
Trump and Carney held a phone call this morning. What do we know about that conversation? Are we inching closer to an all-out trade war?
Yeah, President Trump had confirmed that he spoke to the prime minister this morning. I can read you what he wrote on Truth Social. He said, quote, "It was an extremely productive call. We agree on many things, and we'll be meeting immediately after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, and all other factors. That will end up being great for both the United States of America and Canada. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Notably not, referencing those tariffs and what will happen. And of course, President Trump has been very clear that April 2nd is going to be, a big day when it comes to imposing tariffs on different countries, including Canada. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out and if that does come to fruition. But nonetheless, the president reporting a productive call with the Canadian counterpart today, you would think it's a good sign for relations going forward.
Thank you, Mychael Schnell.
Thanks, Judy.
According to a White House official, President Trump has told automakers not to raise prices in response to tariffs, adding, quote, "They are capable of eating the cost." Trump has upended the U.S. car business by imposing 25% tariffs on all new cars imported to America and up to 25% tariffs on key auto parts, leaving the possibility of a used car boom likely. News Nation's Alex Capriello has the latest from a used car lot in Chicago that may see an increase in sales.
Hey there, Judy. Speaking to used car salesmen, they say what's happening now with the tariffs is eerily reminiscent to what happened just a few years ago when it came to the pandemic. You might remember the cost of used cars really skyrocketed due to those supply chain issues. So what they're doing basically is using that as a benchmark for future pricing due to these tariffs. The used car salesman I spoke to says it was around $1,500 to $2,000 price increase. So this $6,500 Chevy truck could be more like $8,500, or this Jeep that's just under $10,000 could be more like $12,000. Now, while that might give you a little bit of sticker shock, consider what the tariffs might do for new vehicles. We are hearing from auto industry experts that the price of those new cars could go up by $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, maybe even $15,000. That's the reason why the used car industry might skyrocket and boom within the coming months. But the used car salesman I spoke to says whatever comes up must ultimately come down.
At first, people go a little bit crazy and they start to rush to buy a used car, and that boosts, it'll boost up the price for used cars. As far as for us for buying them, it's going to boost the price as well. But people, let's not be scared. Whatever goes up is going to come down. That always happens in the market.
So, while ultimately these new 25% tariffs could raise the price of both used and new vehicles, President Donald Trump still sees a whole lot of upside. He says it's going to make America way more competitive. It's going to bring more jobs to the United States, and it could raise about $100 billion worth of revenue each and every year. Judy?
News Nation's Alex Capriello, thank you. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.